Power up. Welcome to Energypreneurs, where I bring to you the exciting new opportunities in solar power, battery, and electric cars. I'm your host, Sohel Hasni. I have been tracking and analyzing these technologies on LinkedIn and Twitter for more than 10 years. Now we meet on podcast. Okay, Dr. Farhad, great to see you after quite some time. Where are you now?
Hello, Mr. Hasni. Thank you very much for today's meeting. Now I'm in Iran. It's summer vacation in Japan, so I came to Iran to visit family here.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, I know that you have been working on a very, very topical topic, why solar prices have come down so much and how far we'll go. But before I get into the topic, I'll just like to, maybe you can introduce yourself and explain a bit what you have been doing and what's your interest in the energy field and the transformation that's happening, the transition.
Sure. Yeah. So my full name is Farhad Taqizadeh Hesari. I'm originally from Iran, and since 2010, I've been living in Japan. I came to Japan to study, to do my PhD. I did my PhD in economics at Keio University. Then I started to teach in economics, firstly at Keio University, then at Waseda University in Tokyo, and now I'm associate professor of economics at Tokai University, where I'm teaching energy economics, environment, and policy. This is my main course that I'm teaching at Tokai, also at Keio. I taught this course at major Japanese universities. I started this course at University of Tokyo graduate level, at Waseda University as well, because when I was studying my PhD, I found out that although in Japan, like many other countries, in the engineering part of energy, there are good scholars and there are good research going on. However, in the economics aspects of energy and financial aspects of it, I couldn't find any course even at major Japanese university. This was the reason that when I graduated and I hired by K University, I initiated this course, Energy Economics, where I'm mainly teaching on different energy markets, determinants of demand, supply, what are the factors that affect the prices, what are the economic impacts of energy price fluctuations in the macro level and in the micro level. So at this course and in my research, I used to focus more on fossil fuels. However, most recently, I'm mainly working on renewable energy, on green energy, and different types of energy: solar, geothermal, hydrogen, hydropower, wind, and so on. And most recently, I'm mainly researching on the financing aspect of it, because green projects, renewable energy projects have difficulties in accessing finance because of risks which are associated with them, and many investors, many financiers are still reluctant to invest to them. So I'm looking for ways to bring private investment and private finance to these projects mainly.
So when you mentioned that you are trying to bring private finance in the project, is there any specific way, or you are saying by explaining the market conditions, you are enabling private sector to come in?
So both. However, mainly designing tools and designing methods that can facilitate the private participation in this market. So I can give some example in order to make it more clear. For example, as I've mentioned, high risk, especially credit risk, is one of the main obstacles for participation of private sector in renewable projects. because many investors, they are reluctant to invest into the risky project, especially when we are looking at Asian economies. So Western investors are more risk takers. So venture capital is very popular in Western economies. However, in Eastern economies, many investors in the household level or in the institutional level are risk averter. So because of that, they are avoiding to enter to risky investments, such as many of the green project. For example, one way that I, along with my co-authors, we worked on it theoretically and also empirically, is designing a credit guarantee scheme for the green projects that we call it green credit guarantee. So credit guarantee corporations are public entities that the history of them back to 1930s. So, and the credit guarantee corporations started from Japan and then expanded to different parts of the world. So credit guarantee corporations are covering the risk of lending to currently risk of lending to small businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises, where, for example, when an SME, small and medium-sized enterprise, approach to a bank, because of the asymmetry of information, because the SME doesn't have enough collateral, so the risk could not be covered, then bank refuse the loan application. Then the SME goes to Credit Guarantee Corporation, which is a public entity, and Credit Guarantee Corporation assess the risk, check the background of this borrower, this SME, and if he or she, or if the enterprise was eligible, then endorse, for example, 70% or 80% of this borrowing. Then the SME, with this guarantee that received by government, from the side of government, approach to bank, and banks will show interest. So this scheme is already existing, so it is not a new scheme. But what we designed is to expanding these to green projects, and we call it green credit guarantee scheme. That how to adopt an optimal credit guarantee scheme, because, for example, when we want to have a green growth, green development, it doesn't mean that lending to all green projects. So risk of those projects needs to be assessed, and the lending or the guarantee ratio needs to be based on the risk. If the project is sound, if the project has good future, adopting a high guarantee ratio, 90%. If it is risky or if unsound, avoiding providing a guarantee, or with low risk. So this is one side that we calculate the optimal guarantee ratio. Also the guarantee fee. For example, green projects, in order to receive a guarantee from the side of Green Credit Guarantee Corporation, they need to pay some fee that we call it a premium. So guarantee premium. So this fee also needs to be function of the risk. If a project is risky, so higher premium. If it is low risk, low premium. So we have calculated these fees and these ratios, and we designed this scheme. For example, this is one of the output of our research.
So these are publicly available tools that both the proponent of a project and the financier or guarantors can use.
Exactly, yes. So this is this is public. The Credit Guarantee Corporation, as I've mentioned, already exists, but I haven't seen green credit guarantee. This is what we propose, that we hope in starting from Asia and then in other countries, we have Green Credit Guarantee Corporation to facilitate the private investment into green projects.
Okay, that's fantastic, because as renewable energy prices have come down, I mean, there is a global interest now into the renewable. And then IRENA published in June, now it's well established, right, that in how many countries now that solar and wind is cheaper than fossil fuels, right? And you have been tracking that price coming down, no?
Yeah, prices are coming down, and now renewable project, especially solar, is competitive when comparing to many fossil fuel projects. Yeah.
I mean, if people ask that, okay, what are the main reason for the solar prices coming down so fast, right? It was unthinkable, like from more than 10 cents to less than half of that right now, even going down further, right?
Yes, exactly. So this is very important question, and in one of our recent studies that I just shared a paper of it to you. This is a study published in International Review of Economics and Finance. It's a joint work with my co-authors. We looked at the determinants of this reduction in solar modules prices. So first, in this work, we reviewed the literature. There are many studies in the literature that looked at this reason, because this is very important topic. So there are many studies. So there are different reasons according to the literature. One of the main drivers behind this reduction is the learning curve, the effect of learning curve. It's a technological progress that resulted in this reduction globally. And one of the contribution of this study that we have done is that we did a structural study. We divided the impacts to demand side and supply side, because in the studies that looked at the reasons behind the reduction or increase in price of anything, there are two types of a study. One of them look at the price determinants directly. Other studies are looking at it structurally and differentiate the impacts of demand and supply. So our study is like this second group, and we differentiate it. So there are different factors in the supply side and in the demand side. So major drivers are, for example, in the demand side, economic growth. GDP is one of the driving factor. When the country has higher economic growth, then there is higher demand for energy and electricity, including renewable energy. There are several other factors. For example, production of renewable project, production of solar modules is a capital intensive. It's not labor oriented, it's capital intensive. Therefore, cost of capital is matter. So interest rate is very important. So in those countries that governments introduce subsidized interest rate for these kinds of projects, so there are more progress in their development. And there are several other factors. For example, in the supply side, when we are looking, price of silicon is very important. Silicon is the main component, but main raw material. And so therefore price of silicon is matter. R&D expenditures are very important in the supply side. R&D expenditures are coming from the private sector and also from the government. And also in the supply side, interest rate again matter, and exchange rate is also very important, because, for example, from the raw material, from silicon, two components, different components, battery and other components, countries, suppliers are relying on a regional or global supply chain. It means we cannot find a country that produce all parts and components of a solar system. So countries are relying on each other. China needs to import, for example, battery from another country. Japan needs to import silicon from China, some components from ASEAN or from Germany or from other countries. So this is the reason that exchange rate is matter and exchange rate is important. So we looked at different factors, and in addition to that, price of substitution energy carrier is very important. Oil price is matter, and usually when there is higher, when we looked at the literature, impact of oil price on the market is diverse. according to the
But
literature.
the impact of oil price will be on the demand side, I would say. But I'm just saying, if we look at the drivers of this price on the supply side alone, so you mentioned interest rate, you mentioned experience curve or and
Learning curve.
learning curve, and you also mentioned that the cost of capital overall, and I think the is a supply chain is also important if you have the entire supply chain in a country, right?
Yes.
So what
Yes.
are the key drivers on the supply side other than money?
So the key, yes, key driver. So as I've mentioned, let me mention again, cost of cap. So the variables that we had in our models were include in the supply side, including interest rate, cost of capital, exchange rate, R&D expenditures, and the price of silicon, and also GDP we had. In addition to that, supportive policies from the side of government. Supportive policies from the side of government. For example, this study that we have done was in on Japan, but it could be expanded to other countries. What we found that cost of capital was significant and interest rate is matter. In addition to that, government supportive policies, especially FIT, feed-in tariff policy, was very important. So because Japan has had feed-in tariff, still has, but government has a plan for stopping the feed-in tariff policy since it is a costly program. So government support, different types of government supports are also one of the driving factors. In another study that I have done, that was on other types of renewable, that was on geothermal, but it could be expanded to here. The main results that we found out that not all types of government support are supportive. Not all types of government support are supportive. We looked at different supportive plans that government of Japan had for geothermal. For example, FIT, loan guarantee, subsidies for drilling, because that is for geothermal, direct subsidies. We found out that direct subsidies are not only doesn't help to promote this sector, but these types of support has still has even negative impact on the progress. So, but we found out that feed-in tariff is supportive, or expenditure on R&D is very important, because R&D expenditure is one of the parts that many companies are reluctant to invest a lot because it is risky. Maybe you invest there, it doesn't reach to result. Support in this field is important. So this is very important, that when we are talking about government support, it doesn't mean in any form. It needs to be assessed that which way is more effective and can help to grow rather than regress.
So let me understand, because we have clients in Central Asia. Some of them have a lot of silica, but they want to establish a solar power industry. So you are, if we take your takeaway experience from Japan, that government has to subsidize on the sort of supply side by way of reducing cost of capital or give tax holidays, so that the cost of operating business comes down. Some of the R&D could be done by government because private sector cannot capture those public goods. And if you do all of those side of it, that's not enough. Maybe government also need to do on the demand side to create a market through feed-in tariff and others, so that you create a bit of artificially maybe a market, then eventually it becomes a normal market with all its driving forces. Is that a reasonable takeaway?
Exactly. So not only in the supply side, but also the driving factors of the demand side need to be assessed. And in some cases, the supply is available. However, the affordability is not enough. So just the availability of a green energy resource cannot provide energy security for a country like in Central Asia, and cannot result in a diversification of their energy markets in Central Asian country. Many of them are relying on fossil fuels. So it means supportive policies for increasing the increasing the affordability in the demand side are very important, and also the willingness, increasing the willingness of the household sectors and corporate sector to, for example, install solar by themselves, or consuming the electricity which is coming from the green utilities is very important.
So if you take that solar experience and then say apply to electric vehicles, the same logic would apply, that the government has to create demand on the demand side because it's a new technology and all that, but at the same time support local industries if they want to, by way of some tax holidays and other things. And that's the experience from Japan, right?
So exactly. So when we are talking about electric vehicles, or just recently I have done a study on hydrogen, especially in the transportation sector. So this study I've done in China, since Chinese government has a plan for promoting the share of hydrogen, especially in the transportation sector. So in this project, I visited China and I interviewed with the major stakeholders. So the result of this study is also available. I can share it with you. So what I found out, that Chinese government in the supply side, especially because when reducing the cost in the supply side, then it would be also in favor of the demand. So it means it can be transferred to the demand. Had different kinds of plans that in order to reduce the production cost. And if government just withdraw from this market and stop these kinds of support, hydrogen production in the transportation sector is not feasible now. But government is now supporting, for example, in different parts of supply chain, hydrogen refueling stations, bus manufacturing, transportation of the hydrogen, from refueling it from generators to from electrolyzers to HRS, and from HRS to consumers. In different parts, lots of subsidies are providing, from tax holidays, from zero interest loans, from direct payments, and so on, to the different parts of this supply chain. Then gradually the manufacturers which are using this government support in their R&D, this will help them to have technological progress, reducing the production costs, and gradually making this a feasible and economical project. So I believe that majority of these kinds of support should be in favor of the supply side during the manufacturing process. But it doesn't mean to neglect the consumers.
Yeah, okay. I mean, but I mean, sorry, a different topic. I mean, I get intrigued because if you put side by side solar panels that are made in Japan and that are made in other parts of Asia, the price differentials are quite significant, right? Yeah. And although the Japanese government had provided those support on the supply side, and solar manufacturing is quite high tech, you have very little labor involved, no? So why the prices are still so high on the Japanese side? Is it because of a superior quality alone, or the size of the market has got something to do with as well?
Yes, so I think so. Japan is still one of the largest manufacturers and suppliers of solar modules. But when comparing to, for example, China, it's much behind China. So generally speaking, production cost in Japan is high. Production cost is high. For example, when you are talking about the land price is high, wages are